All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I'm your tour guide around the SWAC City Wells coming at you. And we're going to continue breaking down this SWAC race. We are down to the last 3 or 4 games, depending on what team is playing. So we are in the stretch run. We basically have 2 weekends left. We have Saturday and Monday, and then Thursday and Saturday. So by this time, a couple weeks from now, our regular season will be over. So we're gonna go ahead and look at where we stand after Monday's action, and then we'll kind of talk about what's where I think the teams are gonna finish. So um, I have my new power rankings up on bustingbrackets.com probably later this week. So definitely make sure y'all check that out. You can check it out on bustingbrackets.com, or you can get the link from my socials: Facebook is Swag Talk, Instagram Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it, and feel free to comment your thoughts on the race at hand. So let's go ahead and jump into this. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time today doing this, but we're going to start off with with some good news. If you're a Valley fan or you just like to see teams get the job done, then Valley took care of business yesterday against Prairie View, 57-51, picking up their first victory of the season, breaking a 29-game losing streak going back to last season, and a 14-game conference losing streak this year. So got off the snide. I'm not gonna pat myself on the back for picking Valley to win, but I thought they could do it. So the Devils got it done. Unfortunately, I don't really see them winning another game to close out the season. It would be great to see them pull out another one, but I don't really see it. Their last 3 games are at home against UAPB on Saturday, and then Thursday at Jackson State, and Saturday at Alcorn. So those are 3 teams that are battling it out for the conference tournament. Pine Bluff's battling for that last spot. JSU and Alcorn are battling it out for a top 4 seed. So I think it's going to be tough to pull out another win. So I think they're going to finish the season out last at 1-17. But it's good to get that one. You don't want to finish winless. So especially in basketball, you don't want to finish winless when you play so many games. So they were able to pick up a win, and now nobody's winless. Everybody in the SWAC, men and women, have at least one win under their belt. So that's good. You don't like to see a winless team in basketball. 11 is going to be interesting. 10 and 11 are now going to be interesting because FAMU had a great weekend. They went 2-0 this weekend, beating both Alabama teams, and now they sit at 4-11 in conference. They have an opportunity to finish 10th place, but I don't think they're going to get there. They have 3 tough games at Grambling, at Southern, and Bethune-Cookman to close out the season. They play at Grambling on Saturday. They can win. They can win any of these games, especially if Keith Lamar plays like he played on Monday. He hit 6 threes and 29 points on Monday against Alabama A&M, and he had 22 points against Alabama State. So if they can get that kind of shooting on the road in games like that, they could be a dangerous foe. But I think it's going to be tough for them to win those 2 road games, and then Bethune-Cookman is battling it out for a spot, and they're going to be tough to knock off. But they have the potential to do it. But right now, I think they're going to finish out at 4-14 in 11th place, which if you're Prairie View, then you're breathing a sigh of relief because this team has really slumped toward the end of the season. One thing about Prairie View I've said all year is they don't have a lot of size. Now the size they do have, and Brian Miles is great. That guy's a double machine. He had his 4th double in his last 5 games on Saturday. Against Pine Bluff, and then on Monday against Prairie View, he had 22 rebounds. So that's a guy who can get it done inside. But they don't have a lot of other guys like that. And not that and if you see my article about the lack of big men in the SWAC, then you know that there's not a lot of teams with great inside play, but teams typically have bodies to throw out there. And Prairie View doesn't really have a lot of bodies to throw out in the interior, so they are very perimeter heavy, and they're not the greatest shooting team. Now Lane and Smith both can score points Javante Hopkins is another guy who can get you 15 or 17 in a game. But right now, this team is cold. They're ice cold. They've lost 4 in a row, including that upset the Valley. They play Alcorn and Jackson State this weekend. They get Alcorn at home on Saturday and JSU on Monday, and then they close out at TSU. So they have a tough 3-game stretch to close out the season as well. I don't really see them winning one of those games unless their offense can be consistent. They're a team who can get up and down the floor and score, but they turn the ball over a lot at times. And like I said, also the lack of an inside presence consistently behind Miles is not. It doesn't help you if he gets in any kind of foul trouble. So it's not impossible for them to win games, but for them to get in that A spot, they're gonna have to win out, and they're gonna need a lot of help. So at 10, at 10, you can probably consider them out unofficially because they need a lot of help in front of them, and they have to win their last 3 games. So any loss this week is going to probably eliminate them from the race. Okay, now we get to the spot where it's a jumbled mess, and that's 7, 8, and 9. These 3 teams, they all had an opportunity to distance themselves this weekend, and none of them could do it. Alabama A&M, Alabama State, and Pine Bluff. Any one of those teams would have, swept their weekend series, or even, in Alabama's case, if they could have split their weekend series, they probably could have found themselves in a better spot. But all 3 teams lost this weekend. Pine Bluff did win. They did win on Saturday against. They did win on Monday against Prairie View, but that wasn't enough to really help them in the standings. And they sit in a 3-way tie for 7 and 8. And because of the way the tiebreakers work, with a multiple team tiebreaker, you go with the record between the 3 teams, or however many teams it is, as long as it's more than 2. And in that case, when you break it down, Bama State is 2-1 against the other 2 teams. A&M is 2-1 against the other 2 teams, and Pine Bluff is 1-3 against the other 2 teams. So Pine Bluff, you can scratch them out. They're in the 9 spot because of that. So they need to win out. They need to finish 10-8 to really be in, and they have to make sure that they're not tied with either Alabama State or Alabama A&M, because they don't hold a tiebreaker over either one of those teams. They lost State, but they have a minus 3-point differential, and then they got swept by A&M. So they don't have tiebreakers on their side. So they need to win out and hope the other 2 teams finish 9-8 or worse for them to be comfortably in. If it's a 3-way tie at the end, they're gonna miss out because they just don't have the tiebreakers on their side. So they have a little bit of bad luck in that case. And this is a team I love offensively. Colin Milton is a guy that can score the ball. You have Williams off the bench can score the ball. Ishmael Plett, he had a big game off as their interior guy. Martin is another guy who can score. Joe French, they have these guys that can put the ball in the basket, but they haven't really been the best defensively consistently during the season. So they have to be able to outscore you, and they shoot a lot of threes. They make a good percentage, but they shoot a lot of threes. And if that's not falling, then that makes it tough. They close out with Valley at home. They close out at Valley. Is that at Valley? Sorry. They close out at Valley. At Valley at they get Valley at home. Excuse me. They get Valley at home at Jackson State and at Alcorn. So they have one last home game to close out their season. The other 2 games are going to be tough on the road against, again, teams that are battling it out for a top 4 spot. Now I think they match up pretty well with everybody left on their schedule, and it's not impossible for them to win all 3 games. But I think because they've dropped games here and there, that they probably shouldn't have. So I think they're gonna finish at 1-2, and they'll be 8-10 going into the tournament, which for them is not good because I think the other two teams are gonna finish kind of in similar spots, and they probably will miss out on the tiebreaker. So right now, I think they'll remain at 9 and not make the tournament. Alabama A&M would be the 8th seed in this spot in this situation because they win the tiebreaker. They survive the 3-team tiebreaker, but they lose the head-to-head tiebreaker right now because they lost to Bama State the first time those two teams played. They do play on Saturday, so that's gonna alleviate that some kind of way. For them to win the head-to-head tiebreaker over Bama State, they would have to beat the Hornets by 18 points. So they would have to basically blow them out by a comfortable margin because they lost by 17 the first time these two teams played. So they need a blowout to win the head-to-head in that aspect. So if all intents and purposes, it looks like they'll probably lose that Bama State tiebreaker. But like I said, if they finish tied with Pine Bluff, then they win that tiebreaker. So they finish with 3 straight games at home against Bama State, at home against Grambling, at home against Southern. I do think they're gonna upset Southern at the end of the season. I just, for some reason, I have that feeling. They beat Grambling already in Grambling, so it's not impossible for them to beat Grambling. They can beat Bama State, but like I said, they're gonna have to beat them by 18 or more for it to make a difference in the tiebreaker scenario. So I think they're gonna finish 1-2, and that's gonna put them at 8-10. I just think they match up. They give Southern problems with their size. They're not necessarily the greatest offensive team, but they can slow the game down. They don't necessarily play a pretty style of ball. They can make things difficult. They shoot free throws pretty well, which is another Achilles heel for Southern. And I'm not picking on Southern, but I'm just saying what I believe. So the Bulldogs right now, they would be the 8th seed in this scenario at the end of the season. So that puts us at number 7, which is Bama State. Again, I think they're gonna finish out 1-2. They get Alabama A&M on the road, and then they close out at home against Southern and Grambling. This team can score. This team is I've been saying this for weeks. Bama State's a team that I just don't know what they are or who they are. They are very capable of going toe-to-toe with anybody. They're a very athletic team. They have guys that can shoot the ball. That they don't turn the ball over a lot, but they just don't. I don't know. It's just something about them I cannot figure out. And again, this weekend it was the same thing. They got beat. They got beat by FAMU in an upset. And then they had a nail-biter overtime game against Bethune-Cookman. So I just don't know who this team is and where they are. I mean, you lose by 8 to FAMU with a team who had only won 2 conference games at that point. They're not the best team away from home, so I think that can play that can play against them on Saturday. And like I said, they just I don't really feel like they have an identity. Now, if you're a Hornets fan and you watch them more than me, then you can tell me more about what you think this team is. 'Cause I just don't have any idea. But I think they're a team that's going to get in the tournament as a 7th seed. And they, to me, are the kind of team that's either going to be able to win a game in the tournament or they're just going to flame out in the first round. And you can say that for anybody. But some teams I feel like would either win or maybe battle and lose a close game in the first round. So I don't really. It's feast or famine for them to me, and that's why I think they're 7. And I'm not quite sure what kind of run they would make, but they have some guys. Madlock, Hines, Rain shoots so much, but he doesn't make a lot of shots outside. Ocon inside is a big guy. They have some guys off the bench that can play. They just don't. I don't know where the disconnect is between them and me. I just don't know. So I think they're the 7th spot right now. That takes us to our current number 6 seed, and that's Jackson State. They're 8-6. They are a half game behind Pine Bluff and a full game behind Alcorn, and for the 4 and 5 spots. They lost a crazy game against against Alcorn on Saturday. They gave up 22 points in overtime, and ended up losing that game by like 13. That's such an odd way to lose, a game. You don't typically see double-digit losses in overtime. So that kind of played against them. But this is still a team that I think is dangerous. I still think this is a team that can challenge for a top 4 spot. But they have a tough game on Saturday against TSU. Then they get Valley, and then they get Prairie View on the road, and then they close out at home against Pine Bluff and Valley. So, 4 games left for the Tigers. I think they're going to go 3-1 in that stretch. I think TSU is going to knock them off on Saturday, and then they'll win their last 3 games and get in at 11-7, which will, in my scenario, that will put them as a 5 seed. So I think they're going to improve 1 spot in the standings and get a 5 seed instead of a 6 seed, which sets up an interesting matchup with Texas Southern, giving away my number 4 team in my tournament breakdown. Now, if it comes to any kind of tiebreakers, they right now they don't have a tiebreaker with Bethune-Cookman. They split the season series, but they lost that game by 11 and they won by 1, so they have a minus 10 point differential. They have a minus 6 point differential against Alcorn, even though they split that season series, and they are 0-1 against Southern, which I threw that in there because Southern still can slide down depending on how they finish out the season. And right now they lead TSU 1-0. So they have 1 tiebreaker right now that'll be settled by the time Saturday is over. So they don't have a lot of aces in their pocket in terms of tiebreakers. So they need to win out and avoid any kind of ties with the teams ahead of them. So I have them at number 5 and not in a tie situation. The number 5 team right now is Bethune-Cookman. They are 9-6 right now. They finished out at Southern, at Grambling, at FAMU. So 3 games on the road. All 3 games are games that they can lose. I think they'll beat. I think they'll win. I'm thinking they're gonna go 1-2 because I think Southern's gonna rebound in these next couple games, and bounce back from losing to Grambling. So I think they'll lose to Southern and Grambling and beat FAMU to close out their season at 10-8. They have the tiebreaker over Jackson State. Like I said, they have a plus 10 point differential. They beat TSU 1-0, so they have the tiebreaker there. And then they lost to Alcorn. They got swept by Alcorn, so they don't have a tiebreaker there. They and Justin, I to throw Southern in the mix. Right now they lead Southern 1-0. Saturday's game is going to determine that tiebreaker. So they have some, they have a couple of tiebreakers that work for their favor. They have a couple that don't. I didn't get into all of, the multiple team ties yet until that happens. We'll calculate that out when it happens. But I have them as the 6th spot. I think Jackson State is going to jump them in the tournament standings. Wildcats will finish 10-8. Right now, Alcorn's our number 4 team. They're 9-5. They close out at Prairie View, at TSU, versus Alcorn, versus Valley, and versus Pine Bluff. Those last 2 games are at home. I like the Braves a lot. I think they're playing really well right now. They've won 5 games in a row. Byron Joshua had 21 points on Saturday. Jeremiah Kendall is a guy who can really put the ball in the basket inside. Of course, Jeremiah Gambrell, Thorne, all those guys can score. Coach Bussey is going to always have his guys in the mix. They've won 4 in a row. They won 5 in a row. I think they can get to 9 in a row. Will they do it? That's the thing. I don't know, but I'm predicting that they will. And I think they're going to finish 13-5, and I think they're going to finish 3rd. they're gonna finish tied for second in my standings, but they lose the tiebreaker to Southern. Um, they lose the tiebreaker to Southern because Southern beat them in their only game that they played. Looking at some other tiebreakers that they have, they lead JSU by they win the tiebreaker against JSU with a plus 6 point differential. They swept Bethune-Cookman 2-0. Right now, they don't have a tiebreaker over Texas Southern. TSU beat them in the first matchup, so they have to beat the Tigers. You have to beat them in that upcoming matchup to set up to give them the tiebreaker there. They lost to TSU by 11 the first time, so they have to beat them by at least 12 to win that tiebreaker. So it's gonna, it's not impossible, but winning by 12 points is always tough on the road. But that's where they stand right now. But I do think they will get there and avoid a tie with TSU and finish at 13-5 in the 3 seed. Number 3 team right now currently is TSU at 10-5. They close out at home for 3 straight. Jackson, Alcorn, and Prairie View. I think they go 2-1 in that 3-game stretch and finish at 12-6. I think they're in pretty good shape. They do have a tiebreaker over Southern because they beat them with a plus 5 point differential. They lose a tiebreaker against Bethune-Cookman because they only played once and they lost it. They still have to play JSU and Alcorn, which will settle those tiebreakers. They trail JSU 0-1 and they lead Alcorn 1-0. So those 2 games will be settled in terms of tiebreakers. But I think they'll finish at, like I said, 12-6 and at number 4. And then that takes us to our top 2. I think Southern's gonna finish out 3-1 in their last 4 games. They get Bethune-Cookman and FAMU at home, at Bama State, and at Alabama A&M. I think they'll win their next 3 and lose to A&M to close out the season, putting them at 13-5. Tied for Alcorn for second, but they win that tiebreaker. They need to beat Bethune-Cookman by, let's see, where is it? They need to beat Bethune-Cookman by 3 points on Saturday to win that tiebreaker. They lost that game by 2 early in the season, so they need to win that game by 3 to get the tiebreaker. They lose the tiebreaker to Grambling because they got swept. They lose the tiebreaker to Texas Southern by minus 5 point differential. They win the tiebreaker against Jackson State because they beat them 1-0. Same thing with Alcorn. So they have 2 tiebreakers under their belt. And then they have 2 that they can't do anything about. So I think they'll finish tied with Alcorn at second place, and they would get the 2 seed. And that leaves us with Grambling. I think they finish out. I think they finish out 4-0. I think they win their next 4 games. 2 at home, 2 on the road. FAMU and Bethune-Cookman at home. The Alabama teams on the road. A&M Thursday and Saturday. Bama State. I think they finished out 15-3 and the 1 seed. The only tiebreaker they probably have to worry about is Southern, and they swept them 2-0. I'm not really getting into too much more because I don't think Grambling's gonna lose. If they lose, I don't think they're gonna lose more than 1 game. So I think they're safe when it comes to tiebreakers. The one caveat I will throw out about Grambling is they've lost 3 games at home. All 3 of their conference losses are at home. So if you're looking at that, then that's something that can possibly come back to bite them in these last couple of games. For some reason they've lost games at home and they haven't lost on the road in conference play. So that's something to kind of keep in your belt. Southern 1 loss at home in conference play. That was the Grambling on Saturday. And that's pretty much where we stand. So if the tournament started today, Grambling would be our 1 seed, Southern would be the 2 seed, Alcorn 3, TSU 4, Jackson 5, Bethune-Cookman 6, Bama State 7, and A&M 8, which would give us a first-round matchup with Alabama A&M and Grambling, Southern and Bama State, Bethune-Cookman and Alcorn and TSU and Jackson State would be our first-round matchups if the tournament started today. Pine Bluff would miss out because they would finish tied with the other 2 teams who would finish 8 and 10. Everybody else already would be out. So that's where we stand right now with the conference standings. Again, we'll be back on Sunday with this, breaking down the standings after Saturday's action. And we have SWAC Smoke Thursday, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. So y'all make sure y'all keep it locked here, and we will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.